Christian citizens, both trying to be true to the gospel and the fact that we're Christians, and also our responsibility in a democratic society for what is right and just. And we covered some of the history of church and state relations in this country and that sort of thing. Today, we're going to move on. We talked a little bit last week about advocacy, but that will be the focus today. If you were at the first service, you already heard a little bit about that in the temple talk. A little background, simply because I was part of it and I know it. I don't have to look it up in a book. But back in the early 80s, the then Lutheran Church in America, before our merger into the ELCA, stimulated the idea that in certain states where there's significant population of Lutherans, we ought to have an office which helps both the national church make its witness at the state level, and also helps local individuals become a part of a network of advocates on behalf of those who have very little voice in government and what happens to them governmentally. So the LCA approached us here in Wisconsin, and we in turn got the ALC and the small Missouri Synod splinter group, then called AELC, American Association of Evangelical Lutheran Churches, I think that stood for. Anyway, the three bodies which eventually formed the ELCA in the late 80s came together and formed this Lutheran Office for Public Policy so that we would have a voice in Madison as a church and as individual members of the ELCA. And since that time, that's what, 30 years ago, over 30 years, I think we had our 30th anniversary a couple of years ago. Anyway, during that time, there have been several different directors for that office, and now we have a brand new fledgling director. Last week was their first week.
But as you pointed out, not young.
Not well, younger than me. So Pastor Cindy Crane is that new director, and she's here today to share with us the work she is beginning and how we can be involved in that. So with that introduction, Cindy, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. When Ed contacted me, I recognized him because he was in the Synod office for the LCA, and I said, I remember meeting you there. And he said, oh, LCA, you're older than I thought. So anyway, that was funny. That was funny. Right, I've been at LOPPW for 1 week now, and this is my first workshop. So be kind. So I'm happy to be here. I have 10 years of experience in a parish ministry, and then I've also managed secular nonprofits that led me into doing advocacy work and some lobbying within the purview of the nonprofits for which I worked. I didn't have a lobbying license, but now I do. And but we really say what we're doing in LOPPW, is advocacy instead of lobbying. You know, even though we do go and speak on behalf of LOPPW at hearings that are open. Okay, so I wanted to also say that several years ago I was on the advisory council for LOPPW, and I was a young pastor and just happy to be on board and to do some advocacy work. I started this telephone tree in northern Wisconsin, but I never really thought much about the structure, and I assumed that LOPPW was its own separate entity. But actually it's not. It's not even a nonprofit. It's a ministry of the ELCA. And we work statewide, but I thought I'd just show you a very brief video from ELCA's World Hunger Division, because LOPPW is funded largely through that part of the ELCA, and I thought it would help us to put LOPPW and the other state policy, public policy offices into context. Whoops. Let's see.
Globally, over 1 billion people are hungry. That's 1 in 6 people. And in the United States, over 14% of families are struggling to put food on the table. 1 in 4 children in this country is at risk of hunger. These are shocking statistics. Because we, as Christians, know that God has provided an abundant creation, enough for everyone, and we are called to act. We start by listening to people in countries all over the world and around the corner about what they need. People know their own communities best, and it's our job to listen to them and help connect them to the resources that they assure us will help lift themselves out of poverty. What's unique about ELCA World Hunger is the comprehensive approach. We work both internationally in over 60 countries and domestically here in the United States through relief, development, education, and advocacy. The relief work helps people meet immediate needs. ELCA World Hunger works to support congregations who are running soup kitchens, food pantries, and homeless shelters. We know that we are called to feed the poor. We shelter people. We provide basic medical care. All of these essential things that everyone needs to survive. But the biggest part of our work is not the relief work. It's the long-term sustainable development work. It's helping people connect to the resources they need to help their communities and their families thrive. And that development work involves access to clean water, sustainable agriculture, lifestyle, education, healthcare, job training, and microloans for women. We also know that the churches can't do it all. We need governments and corporations to do their part, and that's why we do advocacy work. We speak out to public officials on behalf of and with poor and hungry people, asking for fair and just policies. And we know that to do this work, to do all of this work, we need to educate ourselves as a church, to educate ourselves about the causes and solutions to hunger, educate ourselves about the ways we can get involved, educate our children in Sunday school so that they will grow up knowing that they can make a difference in the world. When we engage in this work and in learning about this work, not only are lives transformed around the world, but our own lives are transformed. You can make a difference in the lives of hungry people around the world. You can get involved in ELCA World Hunger work. Learn about the root causes of hunger and the sustainable solutions. Pray and give generously. It's your gifts that make all of this work possible. It may be our hands, but it is God's work.
So did anything anything surprise you about the video, or did you pretty much already know this? Pretty much familiar to you? No, not really. Right. Well, what was a little surprising to you about it, or what was something new for you to learn in this?
Well, I didn't know anything about the organization.
Okay.
I was glad to hear that people focus on development.
Right. Anyone else? I like the video. It's very brief and basic, but I like it because it puts my own work in context. It's not just advocacy. It's not just development. It's not just about direct service, but we have a comprehensive approach to serving as God's people, responding to the abundant grace in our lives, and reaching out to the world. So that's why I like to show that. Well, it's my first time. I'm thinking of so far I like to show it. At one time, there were more than 20 state public policy offices that do the kind of work that LOPPW does, the Lutheran Office for Public Policy in Wisconsin. And now there are, I believe, 10. There might be one more, but this is what I know of. And Wisconsin, Minnesota, well, you can see. And only a few of them are funded primarily by the ELCA. A couple of them are funded primarily by their synods. LOPPW receives funding from all of these synods, of which you are a part. But it's maybe a tenth of the funding we get for running LOPPW, and then the rest comes directly from the ELCA. So advocacy happens. So in the video, I think there was an emphasis on listening and learning, knowing what's going on in our communities and beyond. And I like the advocacy work in the ELCA. And I have to say, I was out of the ministry for quite a few years and was just approved to go back on the roster. I left in good standing, don't worry. So people always wonder, why did you leave? But anyway, I left in good standing. And I returned, and I just feel this new spirit. There was such a difference for me doing this work from a Christian perspective. And feeling I'm in community locally around the state and with the ELCA. So our work in advocacy includes prayer and discernment. How are we being called? Looking at it almost vocationally. And then we are freed by grace to be freed from worry about salvation, and so we are called to serve. So these are ways we discern how to approach advocacy. LOPPW works with an advisory council of people from around the state, and I talk to bishops. I will be talking to bishops and getting their input on what they would like to see us focus on. And we study the social statements. Based on all of this, the study and input from others, we come up with priorities for each year. The priorities need to focus mainly on hunger issues because that's where the funding comes from. I might be interested in some other issue. I might be interested in workplace bullying, for example. But it might be a hard sell to say that has to do with hunger, although some people, I think, might be homeless because they have had unsafe work environments and have had trouble staying in a job. But it's still kind of a hard sell. It's too indirect. I might have that interest, but then I would have to go elsewhere to advocate for it. For LOPPW, we need to be more focused on hunger issues. That having been said, though, we do get some support from the synods around the state, including in the UP, because that covers part of northern Wisconsin. And so if people said, a number of people said, gee, we really want to focus on criminal justice. And one bishop has already told me that she would like that focus. And people agreed upon it on the advisory council. Well, we could place some emphasis on that because, again, we do receive some money from the synods. And then I think you have, judging from the materials Ed you sent me, I think you've been focusing on scripture quite a bit and the relationship between scripture and advocacy. And so LOPPW does too, and these are just a couple examples of scripture that we would look at. And then Luther wrote, when you say and ask for daily bread, you ask for everything that is necessary in order to have and enjoy daily bread. And on the contrary, against everything that interferes with it, in short, and everything that pertains to the regulation of both our domestic and our civil affairs. And then I mentioned we look at social statements. Now, we couldn't even do workplace bullying because we don't have a social statement on it. We do have social statements on several issues. And the one from Church and Society really easily pertains to hunger issues. And I have already said this, basically, that through studying scripture and statements, Luther's teachings, getting input from people from around the state, looking at the issues at hand, then we set our priorities. Now, I was looking for some kind of video because I think it's good to have film clips when I talk so that it's more interesting. I couldn't find the kind of video I'd like to see done on Wisconsin. But, and again, we do focus on issues in Wisconsin, but I did find this very striking segment from 60 Minutes, which is more about the whole country and pinpointing a couple of places outside of Wisconsin. But I thought it was very relevant to us as well. So I wanted to just show you a segment from that. Let's see here. Okay. And one of the priorities last year before I arrived for LOPPW was on homeless youth. And so I found this particularly striking.
Unemployment improved a bit last month.
This was in 2013.
And the trouble is, job creation is so slow, it will be years before we get back the 7.5 million jobs lost in the Great Recession. American families have been falling out of the middle class in record numbers. The combination of lost jobs and millions of foreclosures means a lot of folks are homeless and hungry for the first time in their lives. One of the consequences of the recession that you don't hear much about is the record number of children descending into poverty. The government considers a family of 4 to be impoverished if they take in less than 20.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I meant to send around this sign-up sheet if you would like to be on our list for action alerts. And I do need all the information on here in order to sign you up. Okay, sorry about that.
$2,000 a year. Based on that standard and government projections of unemployment, it is estimated the poverty rate for kids in this country will soon hit 25%. Those children would be the largest American generation to be raised in hard times since the Great Depression.
The story will continue in a moment. In Seminole County near Orlando, Florida, so many kids have lost their homes, school buses now stop at dozens of cheap motels where families crowd into rooms living week to week. 11-year-old Destiny Corfey joined the line at this motel a year ago.
I never really noticed what people were actually going through until we're actually going through it too.
David and Teresa Corfey never imagined their family homeless. Together, they were making about $40 an hour detailing expensive cars. There was a 3-bedroom home, vacations, extras for the kids. But both jobs went, and then the house. Evicted, they found that the homeless shelters wanted to split their family up, boys and girls.
that was definitely something that I wasn't going to have, was being separated at a time like this. I figured that a time like this that we needed to be together more than anything.
So David, Teresa, Destiny, George, and Chance moved into their van.
George climbed up here on the back seat, Destiny and Chance here.
I was embarrassed that like maybe one of my friends might see me. I don't want anybody to know that I was actually in there.
Where was the van parked?
It was at a Walmart.
We would actually go in Walmart and clean ourselves up before we go to
Yeah, in
school.
the bathroom.
Save some money.
How would you do that?
I would like wash my face and like take a tissue, wash my arms and stuff.
We would bring the toothpaste and the
Toothpaste,
toothbrush and the brushes, like, so we'll go brush our hair in the mirror and like people would see us.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird, but we went through it.
Tell me about the motel that you're living in now.
Well, it's better than the van.
Yeah, it's really small though.
2 rooms for the 5 of them. Their possessions, family photos, you name it, went into storage, and they lost it all. Seized and sold when they couldn't pay that bill.
Most of my stuff was in there, my scooter, my game system, all my games, my clothes. So I lost most of my stuff, so.
I had so many of my toys and
Yeah.
things, my Barbie dolls, clothes, and it was just all gone.
What's the neighborhood like around the motel?
It's scary.
What do you mean?
Like, you hear on the news all the time about like shootings, and it's all right there.
Nationwide, 14 million children were in poverty before the Great Recession. Now the U.S. Census tells us it's 16 million, up 2 million in 2 years. That is the fastest fall for the middle class since the government started counting 51 years ago. One of the areas suffering the most is otherwise advertised as the happiest place on earth, the counties around Disney World and Orlando. Just on Highway 192, the road to Disney World, 67 motels house about 500 homeless kids. The government counts them homeless if they have only temporary shelter. In Seminole County schools, 1,000 students have recently lost their homes.
How many of you in the last few weeks have gone to bed hungry?
At Castleberry School, students whose families are at the poverty level or slightly above qualify for the free lunch program. We talked with some of those kids with their parents' permission.
Who can tell me what it's like to feel hungry?
It's like hard, you can't sleep, you just like wait, you just go to sleep for like 5 minutes and you wake up again and your like stomach hurts and you're thinking, I can't sleep, I'm gonna try and sleep, but you can't because like your stomach's hurting, and it's because it doesn't have any food in it.
And it's like a black hole, and sometimes when I don't eat, my stomach, you can hear like it's like growling, you can hear it.
Usually we eat macaroni or we drink water or tea.
My mom will sometimes like make food and then she won't have enough, so at night we'll just eat cereal or something. Other times my parents will fight about money because they don't have enough money to pay the food.
We have to sometimes take food from a church. It's hard because my grandmother's also out of work and we usually get some food from her.
It's kind of embarrassing because the next day you go to school, asking kids if they want this or if they want that. If they have cereal and they haven't opened it yet, you go ask them if they want their cereal.
We found a lot of families are making a choice between food and electricity.
How many of you have had the lights turned off at your house? How do you study when you don't have the lights on at home?
We have emergency flashlights and I usually have to use them. I'll just light candles and sit around in a circle of candles.
Candles? Yes, ma'am.
I use candle because my mommy brings some.
I'll go up to the car and turn on the overhead and read out there and study.
Ashley Ray raised her hand to add something that we didn't expect.
I kind of feel like it's my fault that we don't have enough money. I feel like it's my fault that they have to pay for me and the clothes that they buy for me.
They're believing it's their fault that they're in the situation.
Beth Davalos runs the Seminole County programs for homeless kids.
Our numbers go up every day between 5 and 15 new homeless students a day.
Every day?
Every day.
And she told us something else is new.
When I first started this program, 8 years ago, homelessness lasted maybe 2-3 months. But now with it lasting 3, 6 months, a year, or 2 years, this is when children are developing who they are, and their foundation is broken.
How are these kids doing in school?
They're struggling. It's much harder. They're more at risk of not doing well. They're focusing on how can I help mom and dad. We have so many students that want to quit school and go to work.
Beth Davalos is working to keep Jacob Braverman on track in school. His family lost this house suddenly in October. When he got off the bus that day, the door was locked.
That was the last thing I expected.
It wasn't your house anymore.
Yeah.
His mother, Rosa, lost her job, but the eviction was a shock. The bank told Rosa she had 30 days, but it was 5 days later that the cops moved them out. There's a lot of chaos and foreclosures all across the country because of the sheer number of them. There were 1 million last year, and another 1 million are expected this year. In Florida, the counties with the highest foreclosure rates see some of the biggest increases in child poverty. Rosa was suddenly on the street, and like the Corfys, she faced splitting up her family.
This is what is important. Is family is wherever you are, together. It doesn't matter if it is in your house, if it is in one room, or in your vehicle.
As long as you're with your family, you're gonna make it through all of this that's been going on. All of it.
Do you find yourself trying to cheer your mom up?
Sometimes, yeah.
And when you do that, what do you tell her?
I love you, Mom.
That always works.
Yeah.
Rosa, Jacob, Joey, and the dog are all in one room, right across the street. The neighbors took them in. We've seen a lot of that in our stories on the recession. Neighbors, even strangers, opening homes to the homeless. We talked to the Bravermans at the neighbor's house. They've been here 3 months, and that is starting to worry them.
I want to give the neighbors their own privacy. I don't want to be invasive.
So you miss your privacy from across the street. What else?
Sometimes, I have to go to the bathroom at night, and here I have to be like really, really quiet, because if I wake them up, I don't want to make them upset and get us kicked out.
Homeless kids tiptoe in a world of insecurity, hoping to be invisible.
People said that I talk too much, and now they say that I don't talk enough, and that I'm really shy, I guess.
You think all this has changed you?
Yeah, and I haven't realized it, but I think I've gotten very mature in a very short amount of time.
Look for the homeless in Seminole County, and you'll find Robert Williams' family of 5 in one motel room. He and his wife lost their tourism job several months back. When Angel Abreu lost his construction job, he and his wife had to split their family among relatives. They see their 3 young children on weekends, and on Sunday evenings when we saw them, the goodbyes are always painful. Destiny Corfy's family got out of that van and into a motel when her dad found a little day labor to scrape together a deposit on the room. He applied at car washes and at Disney World and worked as a bricklayer's assistant, but it was nothing steady. And as the hotel bill came due, David was short. He found himself prepared to do nearly anything to keep his family from being split apart by the homeless shelters.
So as embarrassing as it was, I sat down with a magic marker, and I've seen these people on the road with these signs before, and I wrote a sign out.
What did the sign say?
It said, "Please help, family of 5." Every truck that went by would holler up out to them or let them see my sign, "Hey, do you need any help? Can I get a job? Do you need any help?"
I didn't think that it was gonna have to come down to that. He was actually gonna go and take the sign and show it to people, and I don't want people to know that he's my dad. I don't want to be embarrassed by people.
You must have thought that you would never be that guy, the guy with the sign.
Never in a million years did I think that would be me. And I told my wife, this is America, and America that's full of wonderful people, and I'm going to go out and see what I can do and see if there's someone out there that can help us.
He showed us the sign that eventually caught the eye of a woman who stopped to say, she might have a job for him.
And sure enough, that phone rang about a week later. She said, David, I'd like to tell you, you're golden. We have a job for you, and you can start Friday.
And that's where you got the hat.
That's where I got the hat. And
University of Central Florida.
Absolutely. And I've been wearing this hat ever since.
He's a parking attendant, $10 an hour, and that's enough to keep the motel room, but not enough to get out. George dropped out senior year to look for work, but Destiny is still being picked up on the school bus route for homeless kids.
And when things get better again, we know that there's still people struggling, so we'll be able to help out a lot more and we'll understand what they're going through.
This opened your eyes to an America that you didn't know existed.
I can't believe it.
We all hear about the recovery, that the recession ended in 2009, but some things are getting worse before they get better, and child poverty is one of them. America's motel generation is growing fast. Like the kids who came out of the Great Depression, this generation is being shaped by homelessness and hunger, but also by memories of neighbors who opened their homes and of families that refuse to be broken.
Love you guys. Love you, Destiny.
Okay.
Well, so what struck you or surprised you at all, if anything, about this video?
Just that it's worse than we ever imagined.
Worse than we imagined.
That it's so prevalent in this country.
It's so prevalent in this country, right. Were you going to say something? Oh, I thought you were saying something, okay.
And no motels are being used this way now.
Yeah, quite a few. It surprised me too, yeah. Yes.
I think many people don't realize that in crises like this, any family crisis, it's often times that the children feel responsible.
Right, right. I'd heard that before, I'd read that before, but it surprised me when I heard it on this. Right, because we know it's not, and yet we forget that's how children will think, that it's their fault. I mean, not all maybe, but certainly
But it's
many
hard to
do.
convince them otherwise sometimes.
Yeah, it is. Anything else? I like the way it ended. I thought, looking at some of the hope of people reaching out and people trying to stay together as family, that was, I like that. I was struck by how happy they were to get $10 an hour too, the one family, because that is so little money even for a single person. And of course this was mainly in Florida, but looking at some of the realities in Wisconsin, LOPPW is a group, we look at the facts in Wisconsin and then look at legislation, propose bills, and figure out how to respond to those, how we support or encourage legislators to not move in a direction of a particular bill. I really do, I mentioned this during the Temple talk, but I really do encourage you to read this article on the front page of the journal, Sentinel, UW expert reflects on war on poverty. It's really very good. So he gives some insight on, let's see, what was his name again? Timothy M. Smeedy. He gives some insight on how the safety net programs really are important. Now he says poverty will always be with us. I don't know if you agree with that. I would like to think there is a future in which we won't have it. But he said there will be better times and worse times, and that the safety nets are always important, and he's the one who pointed out we're in the 50th year celebrating the anniversary of the legislation passed that is known as the War on Poverty, but it has another name. I also wanted to say something about the youth who are homeless. Now, when you think of homeless youth, do you think of youth with families or alone, or what do you think of?
Kids that run away, kids.
Kids who run away. Yeah, I mainly think of youth who have run away from home. But of course, that was a really good segment on how youth are suffering even with their families and how families really help them to stay together. Now, a youth is defined as homeless, and it was pointed out somewhat in the video, when they lack a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. And the term includes children and youth who are sharing the housing of other persons due to loss of housing, etc., living in motels, campgrounds, living in emergency or transitional shelters, abandoned in hospitals, awaiting foster care placement, living in a primary nighttime residence not used as a regular sleeping accommodation, living in cars, parks, etc., and then migratory children living in any of the circumstances described above. That comes from, I used to work for a youth organization in Madison. It was a secular organization that addressed LGBT issues and bullying as well. And so I got to be pretty familiar with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, and this comes actually from their website. And I know people at DPI, the Department of Public Instruction, are always trying to figure out how to better serve the homeless population, because there is, a pretty large homeless population of youth. And then here are some of the most recent statistics I could find from DPI. It seems like they should have more soon, of the number of homeless youth in Wisconsin. Another great resource to learn about homeless youth is right here in Milwaukee. The Cream City Foundation has done studies on homeless youth in Milwaukee. And of course, one of the things that always strikes me is when youth are on their own, that the time between being on the street and prostitution is not a very long time. You've heard that too. I don't remember, I was going to try to look it up, but I think it's about 2 weeks or so. It's about 2 weeks, right, if you're alone. So what a blessing it is if families can stay together and you're not just totally on your own out there. So, please feel free to interrupt at any time, or if you have any questions. Comments are preferred because I don't have a lot of answers yet. But you may ask questions. Maybe somebody else here would have an answer.
So you've got 13,364 students that are homeless. Where are they? How are they surviving?
Well, that's just it. Now, I know there was a youth, I can give an example of a youth in Madison he came out as gay. To a large number of homeless youth who are on their own do happen to be a part of the LGBT community, not exclusively, but the percentage is high. He came out as gay to his Catholic parents. They threw him out when he was 15. And it's kind of a typical Madisonian story. He ended up living with a women's club on the east side of Madison, who just mothered him and loved him. But he he had a lot of trouble with drugs and he really had a lot of trouble. He went to 5 high schools within and outside of Madison before he found Shabazz. You may not be familiar with it, and that's okay, but it's a high school that really benefited him. And he got on track. He's going to MATC, it has a new name now, Madison College. Some people in the community, like from the Women's Co-op and elsewhere, invited him to a party. They celebrated him when he graduated. He called his parents and said, "Would you come?" And they wouldn't. They completely disowned him. So that's an example of somebody who found a place to stay. A problem, if you're under 18, you can't really find housing on your own with the way the law is structured now. But you can stay in shelters for a certain number of days per year. Some homeless youth go from one friend's home to another. Some do end up right on the streets. So back here, it mentioned campgrounds is one of the places, I think. So they just find places where they can, and it's a very difficult situation. And, yes, sir.
There's a population, those that are 18 and just left foster care. And they're just kind of turned out into the street as well.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I was always wondering what these youth under 18 do, but just because you turn 18 and you have more privileges when you turn 18 doesn't mean that you're able to just make it, So right, that's a real challenge too. So, so what's happening right now legislatively in Wisconsin? There is, I have this down here at the bottom, homeless youth. That I do know of a legislator who asked me not to repeat any details, but she is putting together a proposal that would benefit homeless youth. So that will be in the legislative works. And then back to the top, federal dollars for Medicaid. Actually, the Sun, of course, Wisconsin denied dollars for Medicaid for Badger Care. But the Sun has not set on that bill completely. We can always change, and there is a bill in the works. I'm not sure where it is yet, but a bill to allow counties to take federal aid if they choose to. So the Department of Health in each county would have to make a formal proposal to receive federal funding for their county. And right now, I suppose they could do that on their own. One county in Ohio did that when the Ohio governor first denied federal aid to Ohio. And then he ended up changing his mind and took in federal aid for the whole state. So that became a non-issue for that one county. I don't know what would happen yet if a county in Wisconsin would try that, but there are some people who are going to approach the legislature and say, let's have a bill that says, hey, we can allow individual counties to receive federal aid. Then another bill in the works, I went to a hearing on it, but I just listened because I didn't know what I thought of it, and hadn't talked to the advisory council yet since I started 1 week ago. But it's called Assembly Bill 110, and it would limit food that you can buy through food share programs. So when I first heard that, I thought, oh, well, maybe that's fine. People should eat healthy food. But then somebody from the Hunger Task Force in Milwaukee stood up and talked about what an administrative nightmare it would be, if we went in this direction, and that it would really be hard for people in food deserts who don't have access to the food that's on the list in the proposed bill. So then, that was interesting to hear. Then the minimum wage, that's going to be a big issue in Wisconsin. I think right now it's $7.35 an hour federally.
$7.25.
$7.25? Oh, thank you. Okay. And federally, in case you're not aware, you can't go below that, but a state can decide to go above that if they want. So it's kind of on the plate of the federal government and state governments right now. One bill is going to suggest we go to $7.60 an hour, period. And then another bill is going to suggest that over the period of 3 years, we build up to $10.10 an hour. So starting with, incrementally with more than is available right now, and then go up each year to $10.10, and then each year add a little more incrementally. So those are issues to look at. And I have all these issues up here because these are possible ones for LOPPW to take on. And then, of course, I mentioned the homeless youth issue. Are there any issues that you would like to see LOPPW address, or what that are either up here or not? Yes?
Where is the 11 by 15 program, the whole business of trying to reduce the prison population?
Oh, the prison population. I'm sorry, I don't know, but that is an issue that the bishop in South Central Wisconsin is is really interested in, and there is some chance that LOPPW will look at prison reform. Do you want to say something about that?
I think you know more about that, Connor, than I.
So Micah and Wisdom and Micah's affiliates.
Oh, yes.
The reason it's called 11 by 15 is because there's 22,000 people in state prison, and the objective was to reduce that to 11,000 by 2015.
Oh, okay.
So it's a bold measure. Pastor Joe Elwinger and some others are involved in organizing towards that end. There's Jonah is, there's a number of affiliates that are named after Old Testament prophets that are across the state that are working towards that end. We have the unfortunately regrettable distinction of having the highest rate of incarceration of people of color of any state in the Union.
Oh, right.
And
right.
One of the things that strikes me, Pastor Cindy, is our pastor before here was Pastor Gary Erickson, and he was a great authority on Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, uh-huh.
And you read Lincoln's speeches in his life, and he incorporates his faith a lot in the public square and in the underpinnings of public policy. And you're reading about Dr. King, and that you find the same thing. And I think we people of faith don't raise our voice enough for the underpinnings for what we hope to be a world that would be more reflective of the kingdom of God than it currently is.
Right.
And I think in the absence of us doing that, things are fraying and falling apart. And every Monday morning I have the blessing to be in a Bible study in this room. And you read the Old Testament, and the Old Testament prophets are warning the people of Israel and Judah, you cannot oppress your brothers and sisters this much, or things will fall apart. And sure enough, things fall apart. The Assyrians run over them. Society rots from the center. And I think that just really, there's a point of crisis for us as a country. You listen to the radio, and it's all these superficial arguments between people who are powerful, that nothing gets done for the people who are suffering. And it's just...
Well, I was just talking to, thank you for saying that. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I was just talking to a legislator who said that she feels that when she brings up issues like homeless youth, that they aren't issues that are sexy enough, that a lot of times she perceives legislators as being more attracted to, other issues that will seem more popular. And then I thought, well, similarly to what you just said, we as people of faith, we're the lobby to ensure that there are safety nets. We're the lobby that can have a voice. And I have a lot of hope in that. But I agree with you, we haven't spoken up enough. And I'm trying to remember the name of a legislator years ago when I was on the board of LOPPW. He gave a presentation in Madison. I lived in northern Wisconsin at the time. But he said, you would be surprised how much we are affected by just a few letters. That the former director went up to him one day and said, well, how are you voting on this issue? And he said, well, I've got a couple letters here, so I think I'll go in this direction. Certainly, it's not going to be that easy for several of our issues right now, because I think people are really clenching onto, an approach. But I still think, people of Wisconsin have a voice, and the faith communities have a voice and can have more of a voice. And I think that's where our hope is, really, in advocacy, is knowing that we can have that influence. Yes.
Are you close to a lot of legislatures as far as legislators?
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't offended anyone that I know of.
But I'm wondering,
no, I'm sorry,
in terms of the spirit of,
yeah.
of the political world right now, I mean, I'm a product of the 60s and the anti-poverty program and
Right.
LBJ and the whole notion of somehow embracing the enemy politically
Yeah,
and
yes.
coming up with bipartisan support. It only takes one vote, and that's the main thing,
Right.
the main thing. And do you feel that that might be emerging?
I'm hoping. I'm hoping. through the organizations I've been involved with, I have connected with certain political leaders, but now I want to connect with all of them.
Yeah.
And who is the person who signed the first civil rights bill that gave rights to gay and lesbian people? A Republican governor.
Right.
And in the first state. And I think there are people on both sides of the fence, Democrats and Republicans, who can be bullying. And sometimes when we read the news, it's like clockwork to see who voted this way, who voted that way. And that dismays me, and sometimes we don't know if people are voting just to not agree with the other side. I mean, that's a cynical way of looking at it, but because I do think political leaders care at some level, but and some care a great deal. But I would love to get to know more political leaders. I feel privileged to be in this position in which it's my job to, but I think it's something we can all do. We can all develop relationships with government leaders, from calling them up, sending letters, asking if you can drop in.
Right.
And that's important. I'm
That-
sorry, there
In
was
that regard, the list that's going around, I hope people will sign up for that.
Yes, I do too.
Because this strengthens your work if you have a network of people here and elsewhere around the state that you can notify when you need backup letters and that
Right.
kind of thing.
Right, exactly. That's, would love it if you would sign up.
So then,
Yes.
are you gonna let us know in these emails what we can do, whether write or email, whatever? Is that the purpose of this?
Right, it's to send out action alerts and to let you know which bills are coming up and where LOPPW stands on it. And you can feel free to agree or disagree, but if you agree, that give you advice on contacting your legislators. When you go to that e-action alert, there's a place where you can look up your legislator, but there are other places where you can too. There's, let's see, here's where if you didn't sign when it went by and now you're thinking, oh, I should have signed it, and you still want to go to the website, you can do that. Also, you can find information, as many of you probably already know, about your assembly representatives and state senators, and then federal representatives at www.legis.wisconsin.gov. Up there is the LOPPW website, which we are reconstructing soon, but it's a good place to go to tap on, click on to the action alert if you didn't sign up today. Yes.
Is it the case that, I think I heard, one letter is worth 10 emails? Is that something like that?
I
or?
still hear that. I can't say for 100% with 100% certainty, but maybe that's a question I could start asking legislators as I visit them. Yeah.
Is the letter worth more if it's handwritten as opposed to typed?
I think that it's worth more. For me, it would be worth more if it's typed, because then they couldn't read it. but
on
if
the
you have
other
great
hand,
handwriting.
it could have been you might, be sort of a form letter then.
Yes, I would be careful. It might be better if you write neatly, but it might. I think the important thing I've always heard anyway is that it not look exactly like another 10 letters they received, or even another 2 or 3. That maybe you can. I don't know, I might send out an example letter. I'm not sure if I'll do that or not. I have in the past at my other organization, but then I invite people to, shape it and create
Writing
it in there.
neatly is not an option for me.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. When you get form letters, and I've gotten a lot of form letters, I'll preface that by saying when I had to vote on chickens in Wauwatosa, I had my mind made up. And some people in here may disagree with me, but chickens are farm animals and they belong on farms. I didn't think they belonged in a urban area like this, but I got a lot of emails, and the ones that I saw on this were form letters. The only thing that was different was the name, sign name on the bottom. The letter was all a form letter. And that's something that legislators will take into consideration when they look at that.
I believe so.
I've gotten handwritten letters, and I sit down and read those. And for those that I'll be retiring in April, but The one thing I did want to say though, the bright spot, if you're familiar with St. Matthew's and hunger, is first of all, we have 2 food pantries in Wauwatosa, St. Bernard's and Mount Zion Lutheran Church.
Okay.
And they get funds through community block grant funds, which is federal
Oh,
dollars.
fantastic, sure,
That comes
sure.
into the city of Wauwatosa, and it's divided by, I don't know if it's ordinance or statute, but there's so much of a percentage that each group gets. And this covers everything from roads to all of this. But St. Matthew's has a food ministry that is, I think, second to none in southeastern Wisconsin. And I know Dave is back here. Fargerberg is one of the Monday morning guys, but we've got about a dozen, including Tim Shawy, on Monday mornings. And our guys, Chris Capper and Larry Jers, rescue food. They go to places like Saz's, and this is really good gourmet food. We get beef briskets, we get, real quality food, which we package into like 20 or 30 meals, and there are 7 different inner city churches that these go to. And they're frozen, and then they go out the next week as frozen. We get like 8-9 bags where there's 15 loaves of bread in each bag that are donated by places. And I know Pastor Margaret made a comment that when you help other people and do something good for other people, you live longer. And I thought that was kind of funny.
I believe that.
But,
yes, well said.
They say that it makes you feel good when you do something positive for other people. And I think it really does make you feel good. It makes you feel healthy. It makes you feel like you're doing something. And then this Wednesday we'll be serving meals at Cross. We do that every 4th Wednesday. And it's gratifying to see that you're helping people, between 150 and 300 people that come through the food line.
That's fabulous. Thank you for sharing it. And could I just point to one more thing?
Okay.
And I just wanted to point to that we're not alone either. And I love that in St. John, when Jesus is getting ready to leave in his human form, he says, God will give you another advocate to be with you forever. So advocacy work and direct service work can be really heavy, but we're not alone. And thank you very much for having me with you today.
And the reason that St. Matthew's is such a fine place for Pastor Cindy to talk about advocacy is exactly what you were saying, Don, that we already care about poor people, but that's only part of the task we have as Christians. And we need to go beyond that, because the resources that are needed come from the whole community, the counties, the state, the nation. The task and the need is so great that we can't just be satisfied to do the direct service. One of the things that really touched me many years ago was reading, I can't remember his name now, but the man who started Bread for the World said the day he realized he needed to do something more than direct service was the day he read that Congress had removed in one vote something like $70 million from the support network for food, which was 10 times as much at that time as all of the churches in the country were providing through direct service. So, and that's an ongoing situation, that the need is way beyond what the churches and the synagogues and so on can do. So that's why we need advocacy. I want to share a quote from Reinhold Niebuhr, which I hope most of you will recognize as one of the leading theologians of the 20th century in our country. He said, "The gospel cannot be preached with truth and power if it does not challenge the pretensions and pride, not only of intellectuals, but of nations, cultures, civilizations, economic and political systems. The good fortune of America and its power place it under the most grievous temptations to self-adulation." We love to think well of ourselves, but that's a temptation. That bit from 60 Minutes shows us that we have so much to deal with. So thank you, Cindy, for being with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for
today.
having me. Thanks
Yeah.
a lot.